everyone, welcome back. Today's video is going to be my eyeshadow palette collection. I haven't filmed one of these videos in probably 2 years. I know I definitely didn't do one for 2020, so my last one must have been 2019. I have over 100 palettes, I'm pretty sure at this point. I've gone through enough declutters and recently, over the last year-ish, that I'm pretty happy with my current palette collection. So I wanted to show you exactly what I have. Okay, I usually try to do these by brand, but I discovered that my palette collection was actually in a little bit of disarray. So I hope I've grabbed everything by particular brands in order to talk about them in sequence. Anyway, let's get into it because it's going to take a while. I am filming it like this because I prefer palette collection videos when I can see the person's face. Every time I film one of these, I get comments about like, well, I wish you just zoomed in on only the palettes because that's what I want to see. I get it, but that's not what I like seeing. I like seeing the person holding the palette while talking about it, so that's how I'm going to do it today. So I'm going to kick this off with Too Faced because they're pretty much the brand that I have the most of, and we're going to start with the mini palettes. So the first one that I have here is the Tickled Peach palette. This one smells like the original Sweet Peach scent. Like, it is so good smelling. I love it so much. The colors in here are a good complement to the Sweet Peach palette, although frankly you can use this on your own and it'll look quite nice. I have brought this with me on vacation before and I was really happy with the looks that I got out of it, even though there's only like 8 shades in it. One of the more recent ones that I have is the Light My Fire palette. I kind of hemmed and hawed on this for a little while, but in the end I did end up picking it up because Too Faced doesn't really do colors like this very often. And I see red and red eyeshadow and I basically lose all self-control. So I picked this up because I really wanted to try out, you know, their reds, and they're great. Too Faced does great eyeshadows. So really happy with this one. And then one I've had for quite a while, which is another great one, is the Hot Buttered Rum palette. It was a limited edition palette, I think for the holidays, probably about 2 years ago. It's a little bit more simple in terms of tones. You're getting your basic like browns, but I really like this mustard color over here. And in terms of like cohesiveness, this one is really nice. This other one is a little bit more of a recent one. It's the Salted Caramel palette. I have these colors quite a few times over, but I picked it up anyway, and I'm not mad about it. I'm just saying that I don't think that this is a particularly unique color scheme. However, I do really enjoy it, and I am really sold on these compact palettes from Too Faced. I think they're really nice. Okay, moving on to some of their older 9-pan palettes, the Peanut Butter and Jelly palette. I love this thing. It's just one of the greats. I used to have a backup of this because I loved it so much, but then I realized I'm not actually going through this. There's no need for me to have a backup. I have significant dents in this palette. You can't really tell. And I have used it quite consistently because it's so good. But frankly, I'm not going to be hitting pan on it anytime soon. So this is one of the original favorites from Too Faced that I wish that they had made more of a permanent product. I know it was limited edition and then they made it permanent, but then eventually they got rid of it, as they did with all of these 9-pan palettes, I think. Next one, the Totally Cute palette. This one was absolutely adorable. I love the names on this thing. The color scheme is fun, but the names really make it for me. Bunny Foo Foo, Clover, I really like clovers and shamrocks. Meow, like, hello, I'm wearing a cat shirt, like, perfect. Storm Cloud's really pretty, Shooting Star, Unicorn, like it was just a really cute palette, and I still really enjoy this one. The Sugar Pop palette. This was another great one, with the exception of Malted Milk Ball. That brown color is the worst brown shimmery color in eyeshadow that I have ever used. And from Too Faced, that's weird because I feel like they've perfected the brown shimmery eyeshadow. Anyway, that shade's garbage. The rest of it is a really good palette. The eyeshadows are really nice in here. This Macaron color, the orange one, ooh, really, really nice. And Blue Raspberry is one that I've actually reached for quite a bit. Lovely color. All right, moving on to these palettes. They didn't really produce that many of these, but they should have done more. So this is the Sparkling Pineapple eyeshadow palette. And this is the more neutral side of things, but there is something about the formula of some of the eyeshadows in these particular palettes that is mind-boggling. And I don't know why Too Faced has never done it again. It is, which one is it? It's the one on the end here. Pineapple Cooler. This thing has the consistency of liquid butter. And it's foil, and it's so freaking pretty. I don't know why they don't do more shadows in this kind of texture because it's so delightful. So that type of formula is in this palette, and then it's also in the Razzle Dazzle Berry palette, although I think there's 2 in here that are like that. Oh no, it's just the one. How weird is that? It's this shade over here called Razzle. Another molten butter texture. It's just stunning, absolutely stunning. I wish they did more like that. So the Pineapple palette has a nice beachy, sunscreeny type scent. This one smells awful. It's, oh, I'm just getting whiffs of it right now. It's kind of like this berry fake scent that just smells awful. And the problem with this is, even though I love the colors in here, when I put the eyeshadow on, it smells on me for hours afterwards. Like, the scent never goes away. It's a little bit infuriating because I want to wear this more because it's beautiful, but at the same time, I can't stand the scent. And when I can smell my eyelids during the day, that's not a good thing, especially if I don't like the scent. Next up is the Too Faced Just Peachy Mattes palette. I love this thing. This one is so lovely, and it was definitely the best release in this format. They came out with the, was it the white peach like this? And that one, that just, no good. This one's great. They're all mattes except for this one color that we always point out, Peach Sangria, which has a little bit of shimmer to it, but honestly, it's not that noticeable. The colors in here tend to look quite bland, but when you play with them on the eyes, they're actually quite electric. Just Peachy here looks like frickin' nothing. Put it on the eyes and it suddenly goes neon. I don't even know how that works, but it does. This one is a great palette. All right, let's dig into some of the chocolate bar palettes. The original, who could forget about this one? I have the original bulky palette, which is honestly a little bit infuriating. It's actually deterred me from using this palette a little bit because it's so bulky. Sounds silly, just a fact. So this one is nice. I had a lot of fun using it when I first picked it up, but over time, browns aren't quite me. I say that as I'm filming a video with relatively plain eyeshadow. I tend to go for things that are a lot brighter and louder. If you're new to this channel and you don't know me, generally I like more electrifying eyeshadow colors. So this is not really me, but I still keep it because it is a lovely palette and it is an easy one to play with. And frankly, this is kind of when I was starting to fall like in love with Too Faced, so I wanted to keep like the original palette. A much better chocolate bar palette though is the Semi-Sweet Chocolate Bar Palette. This one is perfection. The tones in here are just a lot more up my alley. I prefer something a little bit more warm, a little bit more orangey. The peanut butter shade in here, which is the one that inspired the peanut butter and jelly palette, is just fantastic. I don't think I'd ever used that warm of an orange brown in my crease before, but when I put it on for the first time, I was like, whoa, this is what everybody's been talking about. I love the tones in here. I really like Nougat for a crease color. That one's got a big dent in it. And you know what? I even like the Token Random Blue, which I feel like this is one of the original palettes that started doing that. You know, the ones that have all neutral tones and then the one random blue. Maybe this was the palette that started that all. I also have the Chocolate Bonbons palette. Hate the packaging on this. Okay, I'm not this pink hearts kind of person, but I did really like the eyeshadows in here. The heart pans again, but whatever. Some shades that are really stand out in here would be Bordeaux, Cafe au lait, and oh, Molasses Chip. Whew, what a great color. I don't use the pink stuff very much in here. Again, not generally my aesthetic, but I do really enjoy this palette too. And then we have the White Chocolate Bar Palette. A lot of people hated this thing. I'm not one of them. I thought this was great because it worked on my skin tone because I'm fair, or light at least. And a lot of these are basically lid shades, but I was okay with that. I brought this on vacation with me with another palette and used this constantly on the lids as opposed to a crease area, and I was really happy with it. The shades that suck in here though are the darker ones, which is a little bit annoying because it means, you know, like your look is not going to be complete unless you use another palette with it. Smoked Sea Salt and Chocolate Syrup are really garbage. Like, they're bad. They don't blend very well. They go on very patchy. But the rest of the palette is really, really nice. I know it got a lot of hate, but I did really enjoy it. Also around the same time that the White Chocolate Bar palette came out was the Chocolate Gold palette. Love this one. This one is so freaking pretty. They're almost like molten jewel tones kind of thing. I did not hit pan on this one. I dropped this palette and that shadow broke. I love the gold color. The green is lovely. These kind of like copper-esque tones in here are great too. It is a little bit weird that they've only got like 4 matte colors in here and they're all like varying shades of brown. I would have preferred, well, there's black in there. I would have preferred to have more of like the jewel tones in terms of matte colors as well, but still, I do really enjoy this palette. The Gingerbread Spice palette, the original one, Love this thing to pieces. Wasn't sold on the extra spicy palette because I did not feel like it was actually extra spicy, but this one, knockout. Absolute knockout in terms of colors in here. This row in particular, whoo, we don't normally get colors like that from Too Faced. This one in particular, you're seeing like a really bright magenta on camera, I think. And when I'm looking at it from this angle, it's like a molten copper. That duochrome shift is unlike anything Too Faced has ever done before. And I just love how bright Gumdrop is. The rest of the shades over here I use quite a bit. I don't tend to use these ones over here as much, but the tones I just feel like work really well together. One of my favorite palettes to use over the holidays because it just feels really Christmassy. And then I have the Clover palette. I thought the packaging on this was really freaking adorable. I love the cartoon-esque print of these guys. The palette itself though is weird, okay? It's a really weird color combination. I'm not totally in love with everything that they jammed in here. I like the colors on their own. Like I like the yellow, I like the green, the purple's pretty over here, this darker magenta is quite pretty. But in terms of cohesiveness in here, it's a mess. Like it's not a palette that I can usually put together an eye look with at first glance. I usually have to sit there and stare at it before I know what I'm doing. So this one was a bit of an odd one. And then I've got the original Sweet Peach palette here. This one's been beaten up a little bit because I've traveled with it quite a bit. I love this sucker. In terms of neutral palettes, this is one of the better ones in my opinion, just because it's got the neutral tones, but it's got that peach edge to it. Which one is it? Candied Peach here can really amp up the color in a look when you're doing this palette. Like it can go on quite neon. I tend to use it through the crease because it's a fun color to use there. And yeah, I'm just really sold on the tones in this palette. Plus, I love the scent of it. This scent is far superior to the Peaches and Cream scent. Here's one that took me by surprise. This is the Stardust palette by Vegasnay. They did a collaboration with her. She's an Instagrammer, but I don't really know much about her. I picked this up because it was during my heyday of being super obsessed with Too Faced, so even though I didn't know who Vegasnay was, I still wanted to get this. And let me tell you, this is amazing. This palette is so good. It looks bland looking at it, okay? I know that. It doesn't look very exciting, but using this is one of the more attractive palettes on my eyes, I feel like. Like if I want to wear something where I know I'm going to look good, I reach for this palette. It's just something about the tones and the way they wear on me are just really, really lovely. One of my favorites here, the Life's a Festival palette. It's so hokey looking, but I love it. It's this puffy type packaging with a rainbow and a unicorn on it. I'm sold, okay. Not only that, but the colors in here are really fantastic too. They are mostly shimmery, which is a little bit annoying, but somehow they do end up working on the eyes, even if you're doing a full look with it. Somehow the shimmers just work out. I think it's stunning. The color in here that I found to be the most unique is Mystic Rain, because it's like this lavender with a blue teal edge to it. It's freaking stunning, okay? Just really, really pretty. I was so happy to get my hands on this. Did I get this from PR or did I pick it up? Anyway, it doesn't matter because I love this so much that I bought another one to give away on my blog one year because this thing is a knockout. Okay, moving on to some of the holiday palettes that I still have remaining. At one point in time, I had a ton of them. I'm no longer that person. I really only have like 4 now. So this one is the Christmas in New York set that it was part of. This is the Merry Macarons palette though. And this one's nice because it's a little bit more of a neutral but purple leaning palette. I like the quality on this. I think it got shit talked online to be honest, but I actually really enjoyed it. I don't use it a ton, but it is a really nice palette. And then this one over here is one they did the larger format ones, like one of the original ones. I think this was the second year that they did that. This is the Too Faced Everything Nice palette. And it's a little bit bulky because they had some like brushes, I think, that were in here. They were like flat brushes. They were weird. Anyway, I took them out. But it was nice because you had 20 eyeshadows on top and then you've got like blush, bronzer, and highlighter on the bottom. This palette was quite good, but I didn't love it as much as the palette that came before it, which I'll show you in a second. The shades in this palette are not that repeated, but after this palette got launched, Too Faced started repeating shades from all their holiday palettes over and over again, and I started to get really annoyed. But this one was nice. I really like the jewel tones. I like the neutral colors in here. This one was great, but that one followed this one. A few of my favorite things. This is one of my favorite palettes. And it's probably because I've had it the longest. It's beaten up a little bit, although it actually looks pretty pristine on camera, but there's quite a few dents in these shades. I picked this up and really started to fall in love with Too Faced after this. I loved having so many eyeshadows plus bronzers and blushes in one palette. I took this one with me on vacation to Prague and I used it for like 10 days straight and really enjoyed it. The variety in here was really fantastic. And while I enjoyed both of these palettes, they really need to stop releasing them like every year. Like it's just too much. And the last set I have here is the Grand Hotel Cafe set. I kept this one because this was the first PR that I ever got from Too Faced, I believe. So I wanted to keep it, but I really don't have a use for all of these mini palettes that they put out from the holidays anymore. Like it came with, you know, the booklet kind of things. So this one is the Peppermint Mocha palette. This is probably the most exciting color story in here, just because it's a little bit more rusty pink. And then I have the Eggnog Latte palette, a little bit more neutral with a pop of green. And then the Gingerbread Cookie palette, which neutral with a pop of gold. All right, next up we have my Kat Von D palettes, which I guess I only have 4. I thought I had more than that. The Mi Vida Loca Remix palette. I was so happy to get my hands on this thing. Rainbow color wheel, like I could not have been more excited. I love this thing to pieces. I know there's a lot of people who try to downplay it over the years. They're like, you didn't need this palette, it wasn't necessary. I thought it was necessary and I still enjoy it immensely. I think the packaging is probably the most annoying thing with this. I hate having to pull it out of its sleeve. Even just putting it on your desk like this is massive. But the colors in here are so good. I was so happy to get this rainbow wheel of shadows that are not only shimmery but matte, but then you also get like this neutral wheel in the center. Love this palette and I will never part with it. I've heard of people depotting it, which honestly kind of makes sense because this is so cumbersome, but I love the packaging too, so I would never do that. Years later, they came out with the Kat Von D, is this the 10th anniversary? Yeah, 10-year anniversary eyeshadow palette. And it was another rainbow palette, but it was kind of like a little bit more of a grown-up rainbow palette. I thought this was a good like follow-up to the Mi Vida Loca Remix palette, which honestly I don't think was necessarily their intention, but I know so many people missed out on Mi Vida Loca Remix that they maybe considered that when they were making this one, and I really enjoyed this thing. The colors in here are phenomenal. They really go well together and they do actually work well with this palette. They're not identical, but they do complement it if you want to work them together. But even using this on its own, lovely palette. The other one I have here is the Metal Matte palette, and I don't know what the term is, but for words like that where you can read them front to back or flipped upside down. This one was, I mean, the packaging is just massive, but the shades in here were really good. I love that bottom row of all matte shadows, and then you've got the foiled ones on top. Like, that was just a really good idea. I wish they had condensed it somehow, and like maybe just like double stacked it, because I feel like this is such a long palette. Like, this is over like a foot long. It's a little bit ridiculous. And then one of my long-term favorites from Kat Von D has been the Shade and Light eye palette. I talk about this thing a lot. I feel like it's just the perfect neutral matte palette. It works so well for so many different looks. I know mattes in general don't tend to look that exciting, but they are one of the ones that can really transform your face or your eyes, and you can use these shadows as like contour colors too if you want. It's nice that there's like a warm side, which one's more neutral, honestly? I'd say that this one's more cool toned, and this one sort of like skirts that line of more neutral. Lovely palette. But you know what? I think that's been discontinued. I don't know why they discontinued the Shade and Light eye palette, because I feel like a lot of people loved it. Okay, moving on to Urban Decay. I have the Vice 3 palette here. At one point I had the Vice 4 palette because I thought it was pretty, and then I ended up getting rid of it because it wasn't as good as the Vice 3. This thing, such a knockout. Just great color story. The shades don't perform as well as they used to. I think they're just starting to get a little bit old, but it's still a really good color story. I love the green up there. That navy blue is fantastic. This whole pink row is actually quite interesting to use. Yeah, just a lovely palette. The eyeshadows that I end up using the least in here though are definitely this like neutral roll at the end. They're helpful to have on hand, but definitely not something I reach for the most. I then have my beloved Electric palette. I talk about this guy a lot too. Just a really inspiring palette. The colors in here probably are intimidating to some, but I find them really inspiring. And I've mentioned this before, but when I'm stuck for eyeshadow looks, I don't know what I want to do or what I want to put together, I grab for this palette and I force myself to try to come up with something different. And I always come out with something unique and interesting and inspiring. So I feel really deeply about this palette because it's just been a true wonder to have over the years. Then I have the After Dark palette, which I had hoped would be a good follow-up to the Electric palette because it's in the same packaging. But it's okay. I mean, I still own it. It hasn't been decluttered at this point, so clearly there's something I enjoy about it. But it's a problematic palette in the sense that there's no like matte colors in here. And I've repeated many times in talking about these palettes that I really enjoy when palettes have matte colors because they help me put together a look. The shimmers in here are great, but I never think to reach for this palette because I can't use it by itself. I mean, I can, but I just don't like the looks that come out of it. The shades are fine. There's nothing wrong with them. Fringe is one of the best eyeshadow colors that I own. It's replicated in the Electric palette too. But yeah, I don't reach for this one very much. This is a great mini palette. I don't really know when this launched, but I got it, I think because they were starting to launch Urban Decay at Shoppers Drug Mart. This is the Nocturnal Shadow Box. Back in the day when, you know, Urban Decay used to do these mini palettes like this, and the colors in here are really nice, actually. I did a fantastic look with Lounge, Heroine, and Backfire, probably Fireball, and it's still one of my favorite looks to this day. It looks like a rather innocuous palette. To me, like, it just doesn't look that exciting, but in practice, these colors were really good and the quality of the shadows was fantastic. All right, moving on to the remaining Naked palettes that I still own because I have definitely decluttered quite a few of them over the years. I still have the original. I'm not getting rid of this one anytime soon. It is the original. It was one of my favorite palettes at one point in time, and I've used this quite a bit. Like, this is the only palette where I've hit pan on some of the eyeshadows. Virgin and Toasted have been used quite a bit. And I still love it. I think it's a wonderful palette. I definitely don't reach for it nearly like what I used to, but I'm not going to get rid of this one because it holds a special place in my heart. I still have a Naked 3 palette, only because it's nicely designed and was done with my name. I went to an Urban Decay launch event in Mississauga when they were opening the Urban Decay Square One store, and they, you know, customized them for us. It's untouched. This palette is completely untouched. I already owned the Naked 3 at that point that I got this, so I ended up, I think, selling my Naked 3 and keeping this one. But that was years ago, and I've never reached for this palette. It's fine. I'm just not a pink taupe type person, so I just never reached for this palette, but I kept it because, you know, it's customized to me and I thought it was really pretty. And then I have the Naked Reloaded palette. Love this thing to pieces. I think this is a great follow-up to the original palette, the original Naked palette, because they did discontinue it when they launched this one. This one's fantastic. I've talked about this before. I like how they incorporated a few shades from what could have been in the Naked Heat palette, which that palette was fine, but very one note, didn't need to keep it. And then they've got, like, you know, bigger chunks for what I would use as a brow bone highlight shade. And then there's great crease colors over here. This one was done very, very well. And I love that they didn't have that slot for a brush at the bottom. Those stupid double-ended brushes and palettes, stop. No one needs them. Nobody needs them. So when they launched this without a brush and they lowered the price, I was like, yes, Urban Decay, you've done it right. All right, moving on to Violet Voss. Let me pull out the first eyeshadow palette that I ever got from them, the Holy Grail palette. I picked this up at an IMATS, I don't remember which year, because the color tones were very much up my alley. Very warm, rusty. I love the look of this wine and dine over here. But you know what? There's something about the shades in here that whenever I put it together, they don't work out for me. I don't know if I'm trying to do something different or unique and somehow screwing up the color combinations. But whenever I use this, I'm always like, I don't like my eyeshadow as much today. I keep it because I'm still really in love with the color selection. But for whatever reason, whenever I put it on my eyes, I'm never really quite sold on the look. The next one I think that I picked up, I definitely prefer over the Holy Grail palette. This is the Hashtag palette. This sucker. This one is so good. The colors in here are perfect to me. They're like the perfect sunset type colors. You've got gorgeous oranges, beautiful purples, some like more like cranberry type colors, and then you've got that top row of matte colors ranging from light to browns with some orange in there and then a black. This thing is an absolute knockout. I can't say enough good things about this palette. If you want to try Violet Voss, this would be the palette that I would recommend the most because I've gotten so much use out of this guy. I also have the Sugar Crystals palette from Voss. This one took me forever to get my hands on, okay? It was just not launching in Canada for months, and I was driven insane because I wanted it so badly. Because look at it. Okay, this is perfection to me. You've got an entirely matte row of rainbow colors at the top, followed by a shimmery row of rainbow colors, followed by a shimmery iridescent type reflective shade of rainbow colors at the bottom. This palette is so good and it makes me so happy to look at it. Oh, anything rainbow and I'm kind of sold, but there's something really special about this palette. I love playing with this thing. Love it to pieces. And I know I just mentioned rainbows. I also have the Violet Voss Rainbow Palette. This one's a bit of an odd duck, I'll be honest. The pans are really large, and they're all shimmery, and I have used it and I do enjoy it. But again, because there's no mattes, I don't tend to think to reach for it very often. This shade down here, Pearl, just looks white, but it's actually quite interesting. It's white with a gold flash to it. I think the strangest color in here though is the black. Like I just don't know why they put that in there. It's a little bit strange. So I do like the colors in here, but it's not one I think to reach for very often. And then I've got the Bright Vibes palette. This one's weird. I like it, but it's so fussy to work with. Some of the shadows or the looks that I come out with when I use this palette are really pretty, but it can be a little bit fussy to work with. And what's kind of annoying about this is I think they pegged it as neon pressed pigments. There's only one color in here that's actually neon. The rest are not. Like, I think it's leg warmers here that is truly a neon color. The rest of them are just really bright shadows. They're not neon, so I don't really know why they said neon pressed pigments. But yeah, this is nice and pretty. Not the easiest one to work with, but I do enjoy it. Okay, next up I have two palettes by Suva Beauty. The first one that I picked up, I got this on an IMAX. This is the Cupcakes and Monsters palette. And I picked this up because rainbow of matte colors, which is a constant theme for me, I feel like, or consistent theme. And I haven't touched these very much, to be honest. I don't love the layout of the colors. I wish they'd actually made it more of a rainbow from end to end, but I don't move them around even though I can pop them out because the names of the colors are actually printed on the back of the palette, so if I move them around, I'm just going to be confused about their actual names. I really do like Suva Beauty, but I've not played with this palette very much. The palette that I have used from them the most is one I love to death. This is the Saffron palette, and this is such a winner. Colors in here are just perfect. Like, just absolutely perfect. Every time I put together a look with this, it's so friggin' good. And even like when I use like Star Anise down here, which is like this flaky, shimmery brown that you would think would not interest me, works out really, really nicely on the eyes. I love the red tones. They actually blend out really well as crease colors, and the shades in here just all really, really work well together. Favorite palette from them for sure. Okay, moving on to Tarte. The first one I have on top here is the Be a Mermaid and Make Waves palette. Ridiculous packaging. This does not go very well on my bookcase because it's like bumped out, it's a little bit thick. But the shadows in here are really quite nice. I do like Tarte eyeshadows quite a bit. They are predominantly shimmery in here, but there's some fun colors. This, what is it called? Bubbles. Woohoo! It's like a bright blue shadow with like a maroon shift to it. It is so, so pretty. I mostly stick to like the bottom half of colors because they're the most interesting to me, but this whole thing is really quite good, and honestly, even though it's ridiculous packaging, I think it's quite cute. And then we've got this Make Believe in Yourself palette. I really like this thing too, even though they're all basically shimmery. These are fantastic lid colors. They go on so nicely. They're a great complement to any other palette that you want to use. Like if you got like mostly matte shadows and you want like a pop of color on the lid, these are gorgeous. Even the what I would consider like the boring shades, like this one up here just looks like this bland taupe. It's got this like beautiful patina shift to it too. Maybe it's more gold. Oh right, this was more the patina one. The shadows in here are just really, really pretty, and I have enjoyed playing with this quite a bit. One I've talked about that is one of my favorite neutral palettes is this one. This is the Tartelette in Bloom palette. Stunning, stunning palette for a neutral combo. it just looks nice. It just works. Every time I play with it, I'm like, that's a good neutral eyeshadow look. Much like the Vegas Nay palette from Too Faced, this one just really works for the kind of tones that I like on my skin for a neutral look, so can't recommend that one enough. And then I have the Tartelette Pro palette. This one has more mattes than shimmers, which is why I like it. But they're also a nice variety. Like you've got some oranges, you've got some mauves, you've got some like more neutral tones, but then you've got like this column of really shimmery colors that work out really well on the lid. This is fantastic. And I remember people saying that they didn't like it when it first came out, and I kind of avoided it for a while because I was like, I haven't heard good things. Tried it out. I love it. I don't know why people were complaining about it. And then I've got the Graveyard Girl palette that Tarte did with her. This is the Swamp Queen palette. And I do really enjoy the colors in here. I think they're quite lovely, but I don't really, this is hard to hold. I don't love the face colors. The bronzer, way too orange, not a good look on me. This blush is okay, just fine, adequate really. This highlighter is nonsense on the cheeks, okay? Just, it's flaky, it's glittery, it just doesn't work out very well. It works really well as an inner corner highlight for the eyes, but on the cheeks, it's not good. I have two palettes here from Melt. Why did I feel like I owned more? Maybe I thought about buying some and I just never did. Well, these are kind of came together. There's a sugar skull for you, and they do magnetize together. Let's talk about the one I like the least, Vida. Oh no, no good. I should like it because the colors are beautiful. I mean, look at them, they're stunning. I don't know, it just didn't work out in the eyes. I feel like the texture on the shadows is really dry. Even the shimmery ones were like kind of hard to get on the eyes, which is not good. Shimmers should be the easiest thing to apply. So even though I love the color structure in here, it did not work out very well for me. The one I did love though, Muerte. Just so unique. This is one of the more unique palettes I have in my collection. Anytime I put a look together with this, I'm blown away at what I come up with. I've talked about this one quite a bit. There's something so special and so unique about this. I just love that there's all these dark reds over here, but then there's like these dark forest greens and aquas, and alongside some blues as well. It is a weird color story, okay? I know, I get that. But somehow it works. Whoever came up with this one in particular, smart thinker. All right, I have 3 Morphe palettes, which I am almost ashamed to admit because I don't really like Morphe. But there was a point in time where I did really enjoy Jaclyn Hill's products. I would never buy from her these days. I still enjoy her content. It's the weirdest thing to say. I enjoy her content. I find her incredibly charismatic, but I will never buy anything from her ever again. But these palettes are actually decent. So this is the Morphe and Jaclyn Hill palette. Honestly, the colors in here are a little bit too repetitive for me. I think a lot of these browns over here could have been removed without any issue. Some of these shades of pink are just like a fraction off being like the previous color. Like they're just too similar fundamentally. And then you've got like this weird block of 4 colors down here that's like their attempt at being color. It's fine. The quality of this is fine, but I don't reach for it because there's just too many freaking eyeshadows in it, and too many of them are way too similar. So I'm not over the moon with this palette, but it's good enough that I don't get rid of it. But yeah, I've had that for quite some time. And then I've got 2 of the mini palettes that they launched. So this one here is the Dark Magic palette. I really like this one. Quite an interesting color story. This one down here, the murky green potion, whoa, beautiful color. I don't really have anything like that in my collection. The shades in here are a lot of fun to play with. I can always make like a really dark green mystical look with it, and I really enjoy it. I think these palettes got a lot of flack too, but I didn't have any issues with the quality on these. And this one is the Ring the Alarm palette. I had thought that this was going to be a little bit more red than it actually is. In essence, it's mostly just like orange brown, which isn't quite what I was going for when I picked it up. It's fine, the quality is fine, no issues on there. It's just not exactly what I was anticipating when I picked it up. Next up I have Juvia's Place. This one is the Tribe palette, which is one of my more recent purchases from them. I don't have a lot, but it is the one that I bought more recently. Wow. Love the colors in here. Very, very fun to play with. I love that top row of matte, bright greens and orange. Really love this dark green down here too. And the shimmery colors are really quite nice. Is it Coral here? Lovely color. It's like a gold with like a green shift to it. And then the first one I think I ever got was this one. This is the Masquerade mini palette. And the split on this is quite interesting. Like the top half is really colorful, and then the bottom half is like a totally different palette, like it's all neutrals. So I don't tend to use this palette like all together. Like if I'm gonna use it, I'm gonna use either the bottom 2 rows or the top 2 rows by itself. A little bit of a weird mashup, but it does give you a lot of options. Like if you just want to play with color, just use the top 2 rows. You want to play with neutrals, just use the bottom 2. Love the quality on this one. It really made me appreciate Juvia's place in terms of quality eyeshadows. And then I've got the Zulu palette. Don't really remember when I picked this one up, probably out of NYMATs. Haven't touched this one that much. I found this color down here, which I thought was going to be red, actually turns out to be quite pink on the eyes, so that kind of put me off a little bit. It's a pretty color story, but it's not one that I've reached for the most out of the Juvia's Place palettes that I own. And then we have Colourpop. A lot of these are the monochrome palettes, so I'm just gonna skim through them a little bit quickly. The Ooh La La palette, which I will forever call the Pink palette. Lovely colors. I like that they're more neon-esque because pink in general doesn't draw me to it, but if they're neon, then I'm sold. The It's My Pleasure palette. The Purple palette. Really like some of the colors in here because they have a little bit more of a shift that's not just purple, like Mr. Sandman here and then Earthshine. The quality on these monochrome 9-pan palettes is fantastic. I'm always really, really happy with them. But the one that probably works the best for me is Blue Moon. This color, like there's something about the colors in here in particular that just really work for me. I'm always blown away whenever I use this one. And then Just My Luck. Quality's good. Well, just my luck. Quality's good. Colors are weird. They look nice in here, but they come across very blue toned on the eyes. It was the weirdest thing. I was expecting just like straight green eyeshadow, and then everything I did with them just came out looking very blue. Very strange. Honey palette. Was not expecting to like this as much as I did. Discovered just how much I love yellow eyeshadow from owning this palette. Yellow eyeshadow is fantastic. Not very deep in terms of tones, obviously, because yellow's bright. But this is a knockout. I loved wearing yellow eyeshadow, and that thing started it for me. Orangey Glad. Another good one. I love how bright the colors are in here. And I do like the pressed glitters that they've included in the center panel. I know not everybody's sold on that, but I'm a fan. Really like this one. And then I've got the red palette, which is Main Squeeze. This one I wasn't as sold on as I was with some of the other ones, but it is still good. I think it could have actually had a bit of a deeper red than this one. This one looks quite deep, but I feel like in practice it's just not deep enough. And then we have like my favorite palette ever, Chasing Rainbows. I talk about this one a lot. I'm sorry, but it's just an absolute knockout. It's a rainbow palette without being a rainbow palette. There is no green in here, which would have been nice, but honestly the color story is so good in here that I feel like if they'd done anything different, they probably would have tainted it. Everything that I do with this palette comes out looking like chef's kiss. Perfect. Just absolutely gorgeous. Love this thing. And then I've got the Colourpop and Raw Beauty Christie palette, the At Forest Fight palette. This one is so unique. I find this one so interesting. The colors in here are like somewhat neutral-esque, but also like colorful. I'm really enamored with the layout of this palette, and watching Christie's video about it too was just really nice to hear about the shades and why they're called that and why they look like that. I'm really quite sold on this palette. All right, moving on to NYX. I have the Ultimate Brights palette. I talk about this a lot because it's worth it. I use these colors primarily as crease colors. They're really good because they're all matte. They're really good for using as a transition color for brighter mattes or darker matte colors that are of these color tones. I have heard some complaints that these aren't pigmented enough, and I think that might actually be a decent complaint. However, the way I use them is as crease colors, and I don't want them to be completely, totally pigmented. So for the way that I use them, they're really well pigmented, but they are not like the most pigmented shadows ever. I also have the Ultimate Edit mini palette. This is the Brights version of this one. They came up with like full-size palettes of these for like a lot of different themes, and then mini palettes later on. The tones in here are pretty similar to this one, but they actually are a little bit more pigmented and brighter. The colors are quite appealing to me. I don't reach for this one a ton because this is what I'm generally using. It's also nice to have like a compact one too. And then I've got two Off-Tropic palettes. This first one is Shifting Sand, and these are really nice. I don't think they got a lot of hype, but they came out around the time that the whole Off-Tropic collection was out, and I love those eyeliners. Like, oh, those are so good on the waterline. But the palettes were really good too, and I feel like nobody really talked much about them. The tones in here are really lovely. Love the oranges, love the greens. And then the other one is the Hasta Vista palette, which is a little bit more of a brighter, almost rainbow type palette. Love the colors in here. The only one I don't like is this pink one. You can probably see it's formed like hard pan, and it just never really worked that well for me, but the rest of the colors are quite good. Next I have Anastasia Beverly Hills, and I used to have so many more palettes from her, but I only have two now. First one is the Modern Renaissance palette. Everyone's seen this, everyone loves it. I'm no different. This is fantastic. This was in an era where red eyeshadow was not readily accessible. I only think I had a red eyeshadow from Inglot, and that was the only one I could really get my hands on. And then when they launched this, it's like suddenly red eyeshadow was acceptable in the beauty community. And I was so excited because then other brands started launching them. But this was the originator in my eyes for actually making them mainstream. And love this thing. Such a great palette. The other one I have is the ABH Norvina Collection Mini Palette. This is the Mini Pro Pigment Palette Volume 1. Stunning. Stunning palette. Could not believe how bright this came across on the eyes. The colors are pretty, but I wasn't expecting them to look as electrifying as they actually do. This one's fantastic. I haven't tried any of the larger palettes or any of the other mini ones, but this one was really good. I have a few palettes here by Colourpop. This first one is the Fun Size palette. I was so in love with their theme for this palette. It's based on like video games, so you've got names like Cheat Code, 8-Bit, Player One, Rage Quit, Level Up, High Score. Like, it's really cute. I don't feel like the color consistency in the shadows is actually as good as I've used from Sugarpill. I have a lot of their single shadows in the larger pans that are fantastic. I feel like these tend to come across a little bit paler than what I was expecting, but I'm still kind of enamored by this cute little palette with a cat on it. And then I've got the Feline Fancy palette here. I was given this by my friend. I think Julie just got rid of it, and I've kept it because I really like the look of this shimmery red color here, but I can't tell you that I've used this palette that much. And honestly, it should probably be close to being like removed from my collection just because I don't think I've ever really touched it. I might have used that red color once, but that was it. Next, I have some sleek palettes. I've decluttered a lot of these over the years because I just don't use them as much, but there's a few that I wanted to keep. This first one here is the iDivine Ultra Mattes Volume 2 palette. I labeled the Matte Darks palette so I would know which one it was. It's just deeper, colorful shadows that I would often use in like the outer corner to deepen up a colorful look. Love this palette, but haven't touched it in quite a while. And then I have what I call the Matte Brights palette from Sleek, which in their words is actually the Ultra Mattes Volume 1 palette. It's just the Brights version of the Darks palette. Really colorful shades in here. I use this quite a bit, but again, I feel like I haven't really reached for my Sleek palettes in quite some time. And the other one I have from them is the Acid palette, which I had to keep because at a point in time, these were the only neon shadows that I had in my collection. And truth be told, neon's not easy to work with, and these are no exception. They were difficult to apply and to blend, and truly, neon doesn't really blend. But I do really like those colors, and then there's some nice accompanying colors as well. So these are the remaining Sleek palettes that I've kept. Few palettes here from Wet n Wild. I have the Not a Basic Peach palette, which I think is one of their better releases in this kind of, is this 10 pan? Yeah, 10 pan eyeshadow palettes. The colors in here are quite unique. I think somebody said this was similar to the Too Faced Semi-Sweet Chocolate Bar palette. And in essence, yeah, it kind of is, but like the tones aren't quite the same, and the blue is definitely not as deep. But this one's really nice to wear. I really enjoy that one. And then we have the Rosé in the Air palette, which, let's get real, is an absolute knockoff for the ABH Modern Renaissance palette. This one wears really well. Really nice quality. The colors are good in here. I'm really happy with these mini palettes from Wet n Wild. And then I have this Wet n Wild California Roll palette, back when they used to release these 6-pan palettes. Do they still do these anymore? I don't know. I feel like I haven't seen them in a really long time. I really like this palette. This was another one where red eyeshadow wasn't readily accessible at the drugstore, so I snapped this one up. It's quite pretty to play with, actually. I haven't worn it in quite some time, but it's one of my more favorite ones from Wet n Wild, so I kept that. Then I have 4 Charlotte Tilbury palettes. These suckers are so expensive. Okay, I think they were like $64 back in the day. I don't know if the price has gone up. Unbelievable price tag. But I was suckered in by the hype when Charlotte Tilbury first launched in Canada. So this one is the Vintage Vamp palette. Quite pretty. However, these 2 colors on the side really don't look that different on the eye. It does make a nice look, but for 4 shadows, holy smokes, I can't believe I spent that much. The rest, I believe, I received in PR or were gifted to me. This one I know I definitely got from PR. This is the Dolce Vita palette, which honestly I don't feel is that dissimilar from the Vintage Vamp palette. Like, they are very, very similar. But I do think that the color variety in here is a little bit more differentiated between the shades. Pretty, but quite neutral. And then this one is the Rebel palette, which is probably her most colorful palette that I know of. My husband got this for me, I believe, for Christmas one year. And the colors are pretty in here. I love the greens. But it's funny, I never think to reach for these super luxurious palettes anymore. This one was gifted to me by a friend, but I know that she did get it in PR. This is the Sophisticate palette, which is honestly the most dull color story ever. But for whatever reason, I'm still holding on to it because I know it was an expensive product. Okay, I think all the remaining palettes are ones that only have like one by the brand, so let's just dive in. This is Tease Cosmetics. This is their Riot Extreme palette. I saw this, I can't remember where online, and I was blown away. I'd never heard of the brand Tease before, didn't know where I could get it, and then I discovered I could get it at the Bay in Canada and was very happy. But I had to own this because rainbow. And honestly, it's great. The colors in here are great to use. They work out really well. I'm surprised that there's 2 shimmery colors in here. This one's quite neat though. Oh, it's called Cocaine. Oh, that's unfortunate. It's like a shimmery silver color. And then this purple one down here is called Rage. I thought that was a weird choice, but they're actually quite pretty. Then I have the Visart Editorial Brights palette. This sucker was expensive. I think I got this at IMAT's, regularly like $100. I probably got it for 80. It was a little bit much to be spending on it, but honestly I've used this palette quite a bit. And again, rainbow, easily suckered. The matte colors in here are fantastic. Do I think the quality is worthy of 80 bucks? No, I don't think that there's anything special about Visart shadows in comparison to anything else that I've used. But I was happy to try it out. And I mean, I still have it because I still use it. Next one is the Pinky Rose Bright Lights palette. Grabbed this at, I believe, IMAT's LA. And I was really, really happy with this palette. The colors in here are really freaking pretty, and the pressed glitters are surprisingly good. They just adhere to the eyes without any issue. You don't even need a glitter primer, and they just stay put. Really, really like this palette, but I never ended up picking up any more by Pinky Rose because I don't feel like any of the other color stories were as cool as that one in my eyes. Then I have one of my more recent purchases. This is the Kaleidos and Angelica Nyqvist palette called Club Nebula. This thing is lovely, okay? This is a fan-freaking-tastic palette. One of my favorites in my collection now. I did 2 looks with it for YouTube a few months ago, and stunning eyeshadow looks. The colors were seamless to play with. The color selection is right up my alley. I love that there's like pale colors and deep colors of colorful shadows, okay? Like this one is phenomenal, just absolutely phenomenal. Then we have another YouTube collaboration palette. This is the Alma palette. It was with Amy Hearts Beauty, which is the brand, and then Amy Loves Makeup, which is the YouTube channel. I still own it because I actually quite enjoyed this palette, but I do understand that the brand actually screwed Amy over, so I would never buy from them, but she did have this sent to me in PR when it initially launched. I believe they took the shadows from her palette and started selling them as singles without her permission. That's my understanding. I don't know the whole story. I like the palette, but I would never purchase from the brand based on their behavior. Then I've got the Blush Tribe Neon Dreams palette. This is the revamped palette. I don't know what the original version of it was. These are all neon. A lot of people don't like this palette because they think it's hard to work with. I just tell them, stop trying to blend your eyeshadows with a fluffy brush. You gotta pack them on. It is a bit of a pain in the butt playing with this palette, but I've had some beautiful looks come out of it, so I'm very happy that I got my hands on it. They actually ended up discounting this by, I don't know how much, but they called it like a defective product. And I'm like, it's not defective. People just don't know how to play with it. And I'm not saying I'm any skilled professional with eyeshadow. I'm just saying that I found a way that works for me, and I didn't consider it a defective product at all. Laura Mercier Artist Palette. This came out, I believe, in 2013, and I love this thing. It was such a good palette for me to pick up. The Laura Mercier quality of eyeshadows is stunning. Okay, just really, really good. I love the neutral tones in here, but I also love that there's an entire like row of purples up top. Fantastic palette. Great for travel too because it just works seamlessly. The only preset palette I have by MAC is this one called the Art Library Flamboyant palette. I have a lot of MAC eyeshadows, but not really in put together palettes. And I picked this up because I'm in love with red eyeshadow. This has been a great palette to own. I think there's only one shadow that I do own outside of it. Yeah, Amber Lights I have in a single, but the rest of them are other shadows that I had wanted to try by MAC, but just never, you know, pulled the trigger on picking up all the single shadows. I love this thing. Really, really like this. I love the red tones. I love the orangeness. It's a really good palette. Then another one that I have a love affair with is the Fenty Beauty Moroccan Spice palette. I did receive this one in PR, and as soon as I started playing with it, it was one of those moments where I was mad at myself that I hadn't picked it up, like paid my own money with it, because I had thought that this would kind of like, you know, be too same to a lot of palettes in my collection, but when I started playing with it, I was like, okay, you're really good. So I was mad that I just hadn't purchased it with my own money. It was nice to get it in PR, but it's one of those things like, shoot, I should have just like dove in earlier. Fantastic, fantastic. Love the red tones, love the blues. This is great, like great palette. I have the Zoeva Matte Spectrum palette. I picked this up when I was in Australia, and I was very excited to get my hands on Zoeva, because they were available at Sephora, which is not available here in Canada. Rainbow matte shadows, shocking, right? I like this palette, but I find the tones to be a little bit dusty overall. Like there's a little bit more of a gray edge to some of these than I was expecting, particularly with the cool tone colors. They are nice, but this is a palette that I would want to use with something that's a little bit more shimmery. So it's one of those things I don't tend to think to reach for this palette and another one. Usually when I'm grabbing for a palette, I want to use it by itself. And then we have the Colored Rain Queen of Hearts palette. I was sold on this purely because of Sam, or Samantha Jane, as she's known here on YouTube, because the colors are really up my alley and quite a bit up hers. Great palette. Everything in here works so well together. I have no complaints about this thing. I don't know if they still sell it though. This one's a little bit random. I don't really know how I ended up with this one. This is the Sauce Box. Are they even a brand anymore? Forbidden Fruits palette. Must have gotten this in a blogger swap at some point. I grabbed it because it's got red eyeshadow in it. Have I used it very much? No. And now that I'm saying that, this should probably be decluttered because I really haven't touched it and I'm not going to reach for those pinks. Okay, go in the declutter pile. Next is the Glamlight Cake palette. I hemmed and hawed over this thing for quite a while before I finally snapped and ordered it. And honestly, I love this thing to pieces. It's yet another rainbow palette, but the color selection in here is really nice. I like how bright this key lime color is. Icy Mint is gorgeous. The tones of the colors in here are just really pleasing to me. And the shimmers, I do find them to be a little bit dry. The consistency of them is quite different for a shimmery eyeshadow. They're fine, they're not as buttery smooth as I would expect them to be, but the mattes work out really well in here and I've really enjoyed this palette. And the very last palette I have to talk about is the Tati Beauty Textured Neutrals Volume 1 palette. I've mentioned this quite a bit recently, I think, in videos. It's just phenomenal. This palette is fantastic. One of the best neutral palettes that I have for sure. The quality on these is second to none. Like it's like butter on the eyes. They're seamless, they blend so well, the colors are good. I love that glitter row at the top. They don't crease on me. I don't even need a glitter glue to get them to stick to my eyes. It's just a knockout palette. And I know I repeat this every time I bring this palette up, but I would love to see her do a rainbow palette. Like, I feel like that would just look so good in this kind of layout with her quality of formula. Oh, would love to see that. Okay, so that is it. I've been talking for what feels like forever. I don't even know how many palettes are in this. I'm gonna have to add them up after the fact, but I'm sure there's over 100 because that's usually where I keep my collection. Okay, I'm gonna end it there. I'm so very tired of talking. I hope you enjoyed seeing my collection as it stands as of May 2021. I'm gonna leave you there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.